Okay, so superstitions. Some writers have superstitions. You know, whatever works for you. If you have a superstition, if it helps you write, go for it. You know, find your superstition and use it to your advantage. You know, I have a picture of Nostradamus here. Yeah, he used to light candles and stare into a bowl of oil. Whatever works for you. You know, was that bowl of oil necessary for him? I don't know. You know, the idea is, you know, it's common for writers to have superstitions. So don't feel bad if you have one. You know, use it to your advantage. Critics, there's always critics. You got to be tough-skinned in any type of art. There's always going to be haters, you know. Some artists, some actors don't read the critics. I would say listen to your critics. It may be good advice. You know, ignore the haters. You know, of course, ignore the haters. You know, but some people may be giving you good advice. Like, that was a boring script because why? You know, why was that a boring script? Or that was a terrible story. Why? You know? You know, sometimes you just bump into people that just don't like you. Well, it's a personality conflict, and there's nothing you can do about it. When I was young, I always thought personality conflicts were not real. But now that I'm older, I've bumped into 2 or 3 of them at least. And when you have a personality conflict, it's real. There's just something between you and that person. No matter what you do, that person isn't going to like you. So it's the same thing with writing scripts and art. You know? So main thing here is you got to be tough-skinned. You know, just because one person says something 20 years ago, don't let that affect you your whole life. You know, if you go back and you ask them, hey, why do you say that? They probably won't even remember saying it. And here you're basing your whole career on what some idiot said to you 20 years ago. So. Now, when you first start writing, though, you may not want to mention it to people, because they'll just think you're crazy. You know, if you're working at McDonald's or something, you start writing scripts. You know, like they say, everybody in Hollywood is a writer. Which there's nothing wrong with that. That's why you move to Hollywood. You want to enter a new field. But if you're out in Timbuktu and you start writing a script, people are just going to think you're crazy. So, you know, you might want to keep it to yourself for a while. You know. I'm a fan of the Barney Miller Show. It was mainly on, I think, back in the 70s. But he had an episode where they had a writer and a critic were fighting, and they put them both in the same jail cell. And the way the show ended was, well, the writer needed the critic, because the writer wouldn't have a job if it wasn't for the critic, and the critic wouldn't have a job if it wasn't for the writer. So when all was said and done, you know, both the writer and the critic, they needed each other, so they would both have a job. In general, you know, the higher you go, you know, the more you're criticized, which is a good thing, because now nobody knows about you, nobody criticizes you. You know, the better you get, the more criticism you will get. It's no big deal. Okay, so don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. You know, watching YouTube videos all day, reading all day, trying to write all day, you know. Just write 1 page a day, and in 3 months or so, your script will be done. Okay? 1 page a day. You know, that script that you write, you might get lucky the first time and sell it, but probably not. You're probably going to have to write many scripts before you actually sell one. You know, the first bunch of scripts may be terrible. You finally get to the point where you write one good one that'll make your career, and who knows, that one script you can live off it the rest of your life. You know, bank it, put it right in the bank. You know, don't go out and buy $1 million house and $100,000 car. You know. I saw one actor a few years ago, and a huge actor, right? Many popular movies. He said in his interview after he made it, you know, he went out, bought a huge mansion, bought some fancy cars for him and his parents, and within a week, you know, he spent way more than he made. So he was millions of dollars in debt right away, and then he had to go bankrupt. He was a huge actor. Okay? So the point of his interview was, just because you made a lot of money on that movie, don't go out and buy $1 million mansion or a $10 million mansion, because you're in debt millions of dollars right away. So just stay where you are, you know, or buy an average house, normal car. You know, one thing when it comes to writing songs, one instructional DVD I have, the guy says, when the magic is flowing, don't change nothing. Don't even change the color on the wall. So you might get lucky with a script, make a lot of money, and then you move, buy a car, get a fancy wife, and then you can't write no more, you know, because you changed your whole life. You know. So if you get lucky with one, you know, just stay where you are, you know, bank the money, so you can live on it the rest of your life, or at least for a few years. Yeah. Something that I wanted to talk about here is be careful of the information in books, in videos. You know, they may have books on the topic. They may have a lot of YouTube videos on the topic, but go to the imdb.com website and check their credits. See what they've actually written. You know, they're great people, great writers, but they may not know it all. You know, if they were that great, why don't they have a lot of hit movies? Right? So, you know, I'm saying be careful of the info. You know, it's not coming down from heaven. You know, it's not God's gift to the screenwriter, right? For lack of a better way to say it. You know, where I get that from is when I was younger, I was trying to make it in music. A small town in the middle of nowhere. I had a small store I taught music from, and lots of local musicians would come in. I'd teach kids all day, and at night we'd write, you know. And local guys would come down and we'd play, just jam for hours. And we'd sit around and we'd talk about how to make it in the music business. You know, and I was new at it. You know, I figured these guys knew what they were talking about because they'd been in it for years. Now that I'm older, I realized I was taking advice from people that really didn't know what they were talking about. Some of it might have been good advice, but some of it was guys just talking. You know. So it's the same thing here, you know. Just because these people have been in the business for years, it doesn't really mean that they know what they're doing, you know. So, you know, read their books, buy their books, study their stuff, but still, You know, how do you take their material and mold it to create a hit movie? Okay? So, you know, study the pros. You know, who wrote the hit movie? Go to his website. See if he wrote a book. See if he did a video, or she, you know. Who wrote that hit movie? Study their scripts. You know. Just because you like a movie doesn't mean it was a hit. Maybe a cool movie, but did it make a profit? You know. If it doesn't make a profit, you ain't gonna make no money. So study the good scripts and the good movies. Not necessarily the one that won the Academy Awards, but the ones that people like, that a lot of people like. We all have movies that hey, I like this movie, but no one's ever heard of it. You know, just because I happen to like the story or something like that, that wouldn't be a good movie to study, right? So that's where I think transcripts would be useful. You know, you're actually studying what that director put on film. You know, that's how you should write your script. You know, I've always kind of shied away from transcripts. Yeah, just show me the script. But in this type of thing, where you're studying transcripts to see what actually worked, what got popular, I could see where that would really be useful. But then, there again, don't overanalyze. You know, don't get caught up in this for years. You know, study it for a little while, a couple months or so, then start writing. You know. One video I watched, great fella, he's got some really good books, seems to know what he's talking about, but he said you gotta write books and plays and stage and movies, etc., before you can write a screenplay. Well, I don't think that's right. You know, that's like saying I write songs. That's like saying I write songs. I have to write country, I gotta write rock, I gotta write rap, I have to write classical before I can write a popular song. You know? It may be good to be aware of what these other things do, but why spend years studying how to write for the stage, or a book, or a play, if all I want to do is write a movie? Right? It's a different technique. You know, learn to write movies. Specialize. So that's what I'm saying here. Specialize. Pick one area and specialize. Of course, there's a lot of overlap, but specialize. Pick one area and specialize. I want to write date movies for adults based in 2020. Not 1940. Okay. Here I put, why would I study country music if I only want to write rap? Right? Doesn't make any sense. So with all that being said, you know, writing a movie is art. You're creating a piece of art. You got to use your imagination. Take all that stuff you read in the books, all that stuff you see in your videos. It's just guidelines. You know, how do I create a story? You know, there's no cookie cutter rules to create that story. Page 1 you do this, page 2 you do this, page 3 you do this. You know, you got to develop it on your own. It's an artistic thing. Don't plagiarize. Don't copy someone else's work. You know, of course, there's going to be similarities. You know, there's only so many topics. You know, there's a couple characters. Characters are going to be the same. But what you do is you write from your own experiences, then it will be new. That's a saying from a famous song writer. I tried to find his name last night, but I couldn't find it. And I had it on my desk at the music store for years. But he was one of the famous guys back in like the early days of music, 40s, 50s, 60s. So I think that saying has been around for a long time though. So, if you write from your own experiences, then it will be new. So, of course, if you're writing a sci-fi movie, it might be kind of hard to write about your own experiences because you've never lived on Mars and things like that. But the story between the characters, you might be able to pull parts from your own life. Like there was one sitcom, the people were talking about how they wrote it, and they said lots of the episodes came right from their own life. It's like his parents used to do that, or his aunt and uncle used to do that, that type of thing. That's why these were good sitcoms. They were new because it came from their own experiences. So after you're done, you copyright a script. LegalZoom has a lot of good information on it. There's a form called ECO. Costs $35 to fill out that form. It's all online. If you want to send in a piece of paper, it's Form CO and Form TX, and they charge you $50. So it's all, you copyright it right through the government, the Copyright Office in Washington, D.C. Here's the website at the Copyright Office. You can tell it's a government website because it's a .gov here. So you click here, Copyright Office. That brings you to this page here. And then I think they make you have to create an account. So you create an account and then you fill out a form online. Your name, address, stuff like that. And then you put the $35 on a credit card. And you upload your PDF script. Back when I was doing the song thing, we'd have to write to the Copyright Office. A month or two later, you'd get a form in the mail. Fill out the form, put a cassette tape in the envelope with the form, mail it back to the Copyright Office. They would send a piece of mail back saying they got it. It would take months to copyright a song. They used to let you copyright one song for like $10, or if you send them like 10 songs on one tape, you could do all 10 songs for $10. But now with the scripts here, it says $35 per movie script. And that's probably just because they got tired of dealing with millions of scripts coming in. So you really have to be serious if you want to copyright a script. I think through some writer's website I bumped into a few days ago, you can send them a copy, and it's thought of as like a cheap man's copyright because there's a record of it there. Like, you can mail yourself a script. Well, what we used to do with songs is you put a cassette tape in an envelope and then mail it to yourself. And I forget what it's called. I think certified or something like that, where the post office stamps the back. You mail it to yourself and then don't open it, and that's proof that you created it on this certain date. It's thought of as a cheap man's copyright. But if you're serious about getting into movie writing and scripts. You know, if you're seriously trying to shop your script and sell it, you know, $35 is cheap after you've spent months and months and months creating this piece of art. You know, it's only a 120-page PDF, but that PDF could be worth $500,000. Just like when I was in the music thing. Back then it was all on tape. 2-inch thick tape, you record on 2-inch tape. Well, the tape company would insure that tape for hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's like, why would they insure that tape for that kind of money? It's only, the tape only costs $200. You know? It's the material on the tape they're insuring, the recordings. It may take a band months and months and months to record that album. And if that tape falls apart, then they've just lost months worth of work. It's the same thing here. $35 is nothing to copyright a piece of work that you've worked on for months. Okay, and then here we're at the end. This is just a website that I know of. You can go here and download free scripts and study them. Okay, so it just starts at 0 and goes A, B, C, D. It's all alphabetized. And then, like, if you wanted to see the script, you see here, this one, Back to the Future, first draft is in HTML form. Back to the Future 2 and 3 are in PDF form. Okay, so here's Batman, revised first draft, first ham draft, fifth draft. So we'll click on here. You see it opens up the PDF, 119 pages. I can click this little arrow here. This is saying, okay, I'm going to download it. Where do you want to save it to? I'll go save it to my screenwriting folder. Now if I go back to my folder here, here's Batman script. And hopefully you know what a PDF is. Microsoft has a built-in program that will open them. Just in case you don't know, you can go to Adobe.com and get the free PDF reader. Microsoft has a built-in one that's free that comes with Windows now, but this is the original one. And if you just go to the Adobe website, and let's see, it used to be right on the first page. Download and install. It's probably under the support here too. Let's see. Download and install. And these are all their trials. But you can see here the Adobe Acrobat Reader. There's an Acrobat program, and then there's a PDF reader. I think this would be the reader here. This would be the free one. Yeah. So this says install Windows 10 English. Install the Acrobat Reader for Chrome extension. Install now. It's 105 megabytes. So it only takes a second to install it. I already have it installed, but this might be a newer version, so this is the installer. I'll download that to my screenwriting folder. Then I can close these. And I have this little guy here. What websites do now, instead of downloading it through a web page, they make you download the installer, and then you can click the installer and it helps you download it. It's just a better way to download a program. In case something goes wrong, they can fix it, you know, a lot easier. You can see I already have it installed, so. Okay, so I think we covered just about everything I wanted to in this video. I'll upload all this stuff to a folder. Let's see. We'll say HTTP. This is just my storage area here. And then I'll just create a folder here, screen writer. So you can just go to that folder, and this text file, those couple PDFs that we went over, the pictures, they'll all be up there. Okay, so if you go to this website, I'll upload all this stuff here. I just threw two things up here real fast so I can show you what it looks like. But like, here's the text file that we went over here, in case you're interested. And then I just threw one picture up here so you can see how it works. Okay, so I'll go ahead and upload the rest of the stuff too. I do have one more thing that I want to do with you in order to get you going.